KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by my brother, Dagan Moriarty, poet and a prophet. Dagan Moriarty taught me how to off it. Dagan Moriarty walking like he talk it. Goodness me, can't you see I'm gonna cough it?
Ladies and gentlemen, I feel like I'm sitting opposite Anthony Kiedis here.
Colin Kiedis.
That was all right.
Did you like that? I replaced Bob Marley with Dagan Moriarty. It's not the same amount of syllables, but
I like it. I like it, my friend. I'm feeling like I got the giggles or something, man.
Yeah, good.
I don't know what it is.
Maybe you have a carbon monoxide leak in your house.
That would be weird. We're all electric. That would be really strange.
That would be strange.
With all the luck, that would happen, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that you say that, though, because just as I was about to get on here to meet with you to do the show, I woke up and Helene has like 1 million candles going in the house. And I'm like, the house is going to burn down. Like if she goes out while I'm recording, which is usually the case on a Saturday, right? But I'm going to try to stay, even if that happens, I'm going to try to stay here and finish the show.
Yeah, be steadfast.
Show you my dedication.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you got to be careful. Maybe that's why, could be all sorts of essences in the air right now from those candles. Could be playing with your brain. Who knows?
Yeah, making me a little wacky.
One of them, it's an angel dust candle. The kids are really fucked up right now. You better watch out for them.
I remember hearing about angel dust when I was a kid, you know, in those sort of drug things that they do in school to teach you, like, stay away from drugs and horrify you, especially in the 70s and 80s. And I remember thinking this drug specifically made you go on top of roofs and jump off. That's what angel dust did.
Yeah.
And that's why they called it that. Then, I'm sure people did do that among the various other mischief that they got into on angel dust.
PCP, man. It should have been PSP. They would have been much better off.
That would have been interesting.
I was talking to someone on the show recently. Remember when there was that? This isn't funny, but it is funny. There was that mining accident in Chile like 15 years ago.
Yes.
And do you remember that Sony sent them a bunch of PSPs down the hole?
No.
Yeah, that's like a real story. And I was reminding people that really happened, like to keep them entertained. But then people were like, how are they going to recharge them? And all these kinds of, it's a real story. People can go check that out.
I never knew that was part of the story. That was the most terrifying thing to think of for a claustrophobic. I remember being absolutely horrified by the notion of that.
I wouldn't, when you see people like, cave dive, people that go underwater and they slip through these like really, like just these things that they can barely fit through.
I don't even want to think about it.
Dude, on the other side, it's just all water. So like there's nowhere to go if like something slips off. It's insanity. I can't. Yeah, it's bad. It's like when I watch Dr. Pimple Popper sometimes on YouTube, and I can only watch it for a little while. And then I can feel myself like tensing up watching all of this viscera. It's the same thing with all of the claustrophobia. It gets me too. That's why I've said I must be cremated. I must be cremated.
Yep.
That's like a really specific instruction to everyone in my life.
I can understand that.
You must not bury me. Do not bury my body under the ground.
You got into my head with that because I never thought about that.
Saved by the Bell.
Is that what that's from?
Mm-hmm.
This is the most meandering conversation ever.
Yeah. Oh, totally. They put they'd attach a bell to your finger in the casket, and if someone was still alive, then it would ring the bell, and that was being called Saved by the Bell. As you were being buried. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's true. Because they really didn't understand, being comatose and all that kind of stuff, or, whatever. So yeah, that's true.
And then, of course, use that for a lighthearted teenage, half-hour teenage dramedy.
Give it up, Preppy.
Kyle, I want to tell you something.
That's my Slater
that happened to me.
Yeah,
yesterday,
please.
2 days
Yeah,
ago.
let's get focused here. Yeah, please.
Right, because this is I'm still a little bit. I'm trying to figure this out. What exactly happened here? So this is the craziest thing. It seems like as I tell the story, I'm like, is this really a big deal? But it was odd. It was definitely odd. Nothing like this ever happened to me before. So drop the kids off at their various extracurricular activities one evening, and then I have an hour to kill. Right. So in that whole adult sort of father, husband mindset. I'm always trying to figure out how can I kill this hour and be productive? How can I keep it efficient? I don't want to waste a trip. Gas prices are high, right? So what can I do? I have an hour before I have to pick the kiddies up. You know what? I'm going to shoot over to the supermarket. I'm going to fill Helene's car with gas, and then I'm going to shoot in, and Lilia needed like canned goods for a student council food drive. So let me run in there and grab those things for her now. She doesn't have to worry about it later in the week. Okay, plan. Get in the car, zip over to the supermarket. It's like just a
Giant Eagle?
Giant. This is Giant.
Oh, Giant. Yeah, you have Giant. What's Giant Eagle? That's something else?
Giant
is that something? What is that? Okay, so Giant. I'm going to look up. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was trying to get a visual.
Yeah. I want to paint the picture. It was Giant supermarket. Was
Giant Eagle is also a supermarket. Okay.
Giant Eagle, it's called?
Yeah.
That sounds so much cooler than just Giant.
Yeah, I don't know why I feel like I knew that, but I don't know why. Anyway, so Giant. Okay, so you're at Giant. I can visualize it. I've been there. Okay,
yeah, Giant,
I'm
8
following
o'clock.
along. Yeah.
It's winter. We're coming up on winter, so it's already dark outside.
Got it.
Getting out of the car, not too crowded, getting ready to cross the crosswalk to get to the supermarket from the parking lot. Ambulance zips up. I hear it. It's coming fast down the strip mall stretch there, and lights blaring, horns going, sirens going. Pulls up right in front of Giant. So I let it cross before I cross the crosswalk. 2 paramedic EMTs jump out of their respective doors, running the supermarket. I'm like, holy shit! Like something's going down in Giant, right? And as the paramedics run in, I'm walking up behind them. I grab my card, give them a little distance. There's a lady walking out, a shopper walking out with her shopping cart full of groceries or whatever. Probably middle-aged, like 60s. She looked like, I was telling Helene, she looked like Jamie Lee Curtis. Very put together, stylish glasses, short haircut, well-dressed, right?
Followed by a man, a huge 7-foot man lumbering towards her.
You know what? An interesting, as a little aside here, Jamie Lee Curtis, don't forget this, married to Christopher Guest. Long time marriage.
I don't think I knew that.
Yes. They've been together for a very... Is that an odd pairing?
Yeah, that's wild. That's so funny.
Very odd.
She must be really funny. She must be funny.
Yeah, I would imagine so, right? She seems like she's pretty chill, a chill woman.
This one goes up to 11.
Picture Jamie Lee Curtis. Okay, comes out. She's coming out. I'm walking. It's just her coming out. It's just me walking in. The paramedics are already inside. She looks at me and she goes, "Wow, someone really shopped till they drop." I'm like, so she's making a joke about this emergency situation. She's looking right at me as she says it, right? She just has a funny quip. She wants to share it with a stranger. Mm-hmm. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I was in this predicament of usually if a kindly stranger makes a joke or a little quip or something, I'll pity laugh. Usually that's an older man. I feel like it. Yeah. Like I couldn't do it. I found myself pretending she wasn't even there. Like I was just looking straight ahead. I heard it, but I didn't want to acknowledge it because I didn't want to laugh because I didn't know if it was inappropriate to laugh or not. Right. Yeah. And then, so I walk, and so I'm walking in, and as I'm entering the produce department in there, I'm thinking like, what was that? Was it appropriate to make the joke? Should I have laughed? I actually did think it was kind of funny, but at the same time, I'm shocked that she said it. Right. It also seemed to be coming out of a weird, I could see a teenage kid saying it, but like it was coming from a weird package.
It was coming from Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah. It just didn't seem to fit the person. Right.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And then I'm getting a little mad. I was like that she was stealing my dad joke thunder. That was my next emotion. Right. I went through the whole range of emotions. I was like, oh, wait, that should have been me, But what do you think? Was that? Now, she was out of earshot of the paramedics and obviously of the person, whatever person was being afflicted by the emergency inside. So it wasn't, no one could hear her. No one of importance in the situation could hear her. Right. I don't know. I still don't know what to make of it. I told Lilia and she thought it was, when she got out of dance and she thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it is funny. I think it's funny. I don't think you didn't have to, what do you, I mean, I don't want to say, what do you care?
Someone's having a stroke inside, a heart attack. Right. It would have been okay to
I don't know. It's like,
it's odd.
I like inappropriate humor. So I think, but I think that it's more the social moray of whether you acknowledge, I mean, you could have just been like, hey, fuck you, lady. When
How dare you? I could have taken exception.
Oh, yeah. You could have done that. Yeah.
Now, what if the EMTs were wheeling out the gurney with the victim on there, and she said it to the person, to the EMTs? That would have been pretty heinous. I feel.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think that would have been different than it would have been. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm just gonna walk by. Yeah.
Helene's take is that she was waiting to make that joke for possibly years, for just that situation to happen. See the ambulance in the store, shop till you drop. You
were the guy. It was a dud, dude. I mean, she's like got to take that with her, you know?
She was working on that for possibly decades.
She's got to work on her material a little bit.
Her timing was good. It was just, you know what? She give her points for being bold. She was trying something out. You know, it just wasn't. It didn't. I wasn't the right audience, I guess.
No,
in that moment,
I don't think so.
I think I was being a little bit of a stick in the mud. Now I'm being hard on myself.
Yeah, you could have ruined her confidence. You know, you might have been the one that ruined her confidence. Who knows?
Well, she's got to build. I mean, she's got to get back to the notebook. The material needs to evolve a little bit, strengthen it. It's tough love.
People still, I mean, I haven't been to a comedy club in probably 10 years, but even when I was going to them, sometimes comics still would bring tape recorders with them and put them on stage with them to listen to themselves. I wonder if they still do that or if they finally are using their phones.
Just use their phones.
But to listen to their material and hopefully bomb. And you bomb on tape, you bomb in perpetuity.
It's all timing, my friend.
All right.
She deserved better, this lady. If she's listening, I want.
Wow, you've come full circle. Yeah, if she's out there, she deserves
better. Yeah, because it would have been no harm, no foul. You know what I mean? Like eventually the guys did wheel the gurney out with somebody on there. I'm not sure what the problem was. I saw it from afar, from down one of the aisles. So there was something going on. There was some kind of emergency. These guys weren't running in for a quart of milk.
Someone tripped on a tomato. That's what happened.
See, you should get together with this lady. You got all the kind of inappropriate supermarket injury humor.
Yeah, we got a little routine going, me and this lady, you know, a little Abbott and Costello kind of thing going on here about the supermarket. She and I.
Maybe I'll see her again.
You might. She's very recognizable.
Yeah,
so
definitely. She stood out. Yeah.
If you see her again, you have to solemnly vow that you're going to walk up to her and be like, I'm sorry, I didn't laugh at your joke.
And she totally
in other words, when you see her, you have to be so dedicated to it in your mind that when you see her, you're automatically walking over to her before you even know what's happening. You know, being like, I got to make this right.
That would be amazing. And it would be amazing if she saw me first and was like, I was wondering if you were going to come over and make right.
Right, exactly. And then you guys go on like a buddy cop kind of thing for 90 to 120 minutes.
I feel like she's never coming back to the supermarket. She seemed a little out of place anyway, but I feel like she's like, screw that town. Like,
why was she out of place?
Humorless fucks
in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she was like from the city and she was just kind of on a jaunt to the suburbs, and that was it. It's a one-off now. She needs to be. These aren't my people, obviously. I tried.
How's that intersection by your house where you have to slow down and go 2 miles an hour?
I avoid. It's funny that you say that because I think about this weekly. I avoid that intersection at all costs. When I'm driving Lilia specifically to dance, she dances 5 days a week. That would be the way to go as the most direct route. And I purposely avoid it. It frustrates the shit out of her because we're running late. I still go the longer way just to stay out of that intersection. That intersection is just a problem. It's just that whole, not even the intersection. I would say that probably half a mile radius of that whole area is just it's too much. It's very Long Island-esque. You know, it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. It's just a 4-way intersection. But I think it's just the density of
But
traffic.
It's also like that it dips like below sea level in the middle of the intersection as well. And you have to like drive
it's not good.
Very carefully over. No.
Yeah, I feel like it should have been updated like 35 years ago and just never. They call that area the Speedway because it was once a racetrack before I guess it was developed, before the suburbs were really developed out here. Maybe it was longer, 50s or something. But yeah, it's funny that you say that because I just avoid it at all costs. And much to Lilia's chagrin, my friend.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, my friend.
How are you doing?
Well, nothing happening here. We're just working hard to get done for the holidays.
Mm-hmm. Man dash.
Recording show after show, playing some games. Dad's here again this weekend. I feel like Dad lives in this house now. Yeah.
Declan's birthday?
No, it was Declan's birthday, but he's here for Finley's. He's in a play.
That's right. That's right.
So Dad's here. I was telling him, I was making him laugh yesterday. I'm like, because I don't really have time to hang out with him this time around, but he's staying here. I'm like, I feel like I see you more than Mom, which is strange because Mom lives here.
Yeah, she does.
For some reason, Dad just keeps rolling into my house every 2 weeks. So he's here and we're having a good time. I'm excited. My solar panels are on my house now, which is
on already?
They're on already, but they're not activated yet. They still have to get inspected by the county. Then they have to get inspected by the electric company and all that. So we're still a few weeks away, but I was thinking, I'm really, really obsessed with this idea of zeroing out my costs of living as much as possible. Like when I bought my house, I put half down, which is a lot for people to minimize my mortgage rate. And then I spread the mortgage over 30 years. So my mortgage is nothing. It's hysterical how low my mortgage is compared to like what the house is. And
50%.
But I've been slowly, paying that off or whatever. And I'm probably just I'm a chronic saver, as people know. I don't spend money on anything. So I'm probably going to try to pay the house off in the next few years and just try to not have a mortgage. And this electric bill is me trying to have no electric bill. And I was telling Micah, I'm fantasizing about just having no bills. Like how could I get as low as possible to where it's just a few $100 a month? Your cable, your phone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be totally honest with you. Mom still pays my phone bill. I'm totally honest with you about
that. You should edit that out.
No, I can't.
You should. This is amazing. I didn't even know this.
Mom, I've tried on half dozen occasions perhaps to get off of Mom's phone bill over the years. And I've given Mom at times thousands of dollars at a time because she keeps paying for my phone bill. So I'm like, here's the last 5 years worth of phone bill, I guess, because she has this idea that because we've had the phone numbers all together for 20 years or so, like all of our numbers
in a long time.
And she's like, we are grandfathered into like the grandfathered, which is true. At like, it's T-Mobile now, but at Sprint, where like our bill is so low. She's like, we can't like do anything to the plan at all. Yes. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I see the bill and I'm like, you're right. It is. We have like unlimited data grandfathered into just permanent unlimited data. It's awesome.
Yeah, but you don't want to provide. It's the rent control of data, phone usage. You don't want to mess with that. You don't want to provoke. Isn't it weird though? It's just like some little computer. It's not even them knowing. Any one person knowing. It's just like some computer thing. If they catch up to it, they'll be like, oh, wait, we have to update this. These people are paying 2002 rates or whatever,
Right.
So,
And so needless to say, I'm not paying my phone bill anyway, but I'm trying to get my various costs as low as possible. I have it all goes back to this paranoia of having nothing. I don't know why I feel that way. Where I'm like really scared. I've always been really scared of like losing my money, losing my house. In this case, losing all these things. And so, that. I don't know why. Maybe it's because my life was destroyed when I was 7 years old. It probably has something to do with that. But so the solar panels are just a part of it. But it feels good to be green as well. Like I really feel like my carbon footprint must now be negative once the solar panels are on because I don't have a car.
Yeah,
we have one car in our household, but I don't have a car, and it's just a small little Japanese car. And I don't contribute to. So hopefully, this will make things better, a little bit better for our yearning planet Earth.
I like it, man. I told you. I think you're gonna. I think you are in the position to possibly make a profit to sell off the excess energy that you're producing from those panels back to the, the power company, which is
we got a 1-to-1 thing here, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's huge.
So any I don't know what it is, a watt or whatever that you would make that you don't use, you get sent back and you get a credit for it, basically.
Yes, so, right. You get credit, right? Exactly. Well,
so hopefully with my pool really destroyed the electric bill. Like I didn't calculate for that in my mind. Not that it's like the end of the world, but when we turn on we have a heater and like the pool pump.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. When I got the power bill, it went up like 4 times,
Yes. And would do that. That would do it. Yeah.
So they show on their charts, like during the summer, I'll be paying a little bit of a bill.
Okay.
But it won't be hundreds of dollars, which is what it was. Between the central air, the pool pump, and the heater, not a good scene. So,
no, but now you'll be in the black. You'll be back in the black, my friend.
I hope so. So that's the whole thing. I've even been fantasizing about like, because you know how your property taxes are based on your home value. Now, home valuations are going down, but they've gone really up. Like my house has gone up like substantial amounts of money. There used to be a sign when you go into my neighborhood saying house is starting in the high 300s or whatever.
Right.
And now it says house is starting in the 500s, but they're the same houses.
This was over 3 years ish.
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't want to be paying at this rate. So I don't want to do this quite yet, but I've been fantasizing about this idea of like, maybe if there's a recession coming and a housing kind of crisis or whatever, I go to the government and I'm like, I'll pay 10 years of property tax at the new valuation right now, and like buying all these ways where I don't have to like spend any money and then just see how long I can go just living my life like a bohemian man, If
anyone could do it, Kyle, it's you.
That's my fantasy.
I really think this. I believe in you 100% in this.
And I'm so grateful to have the flexibility to do this because I am so hesitant to spend money on anything else. so I can satiate my weird OCD as much as I can. Okay. As you can see, as I wear the same t-shirt and fucking sweatshirt like every day of my life.
Maybe you also have a Charlie Brown closet full of those things.
What ends up happening is that just I have a million articles of clothing, but then I do the laundry and then it just, actually Micah does the laundry now and then it just goes on top of everything. And so I just wear the same 5 things.
Yep, that rotation.
I don't give a shit, to be honest with you. I just don't care.
You just got to rotate.
Yeah, I know. You got to just flip the pile upside down, basically.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Easy peasy.
All right. Anyway, we're going on and on. It's my fault. Let's talk about, as our conversation about some great seminal albums goes on, Western albums, we come to the first American album that we are going to cover. And it's the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magik from 1991, released in September 1991. This funk rap rock record, this just absolutely famous record full of, I would say, probably 4 very well-known songs: Under the Bridge, Suck My Kiss, Breaking the Girl, Give It Away. Give It Away is so good. And this album comes from a very mysterious time for me. Like it's 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, very interesting time in my life, but also because I was very young and it's like kind of when you're starting to form memories that you bring with you, but also musically, grunge and all of this fusion rock that was combining all of this stuff. Red Hot Chili Peppers, and listening to this record recently, I've obviously listened to this record a million times, but I'm like, man, this is so far ahead of its time. And the musicianship is, especially in the rhythm section and on the low end, is just totally insane. So I'm curious what your history is with the Chili Peppers and if you remember Blood Sugar Sex Magik, which I think came out the beginning of your senior year of high school.
That's right. Yeah. I was a tender 17 years old, right at the beginning of my senior year of high school. You know what's the funny thing about it that I realized yesterday as I was doing a bit of research and listening to the album again, Kyle? This was right in the middle, right in that center point, the boiling point of the grunge era. And in fact, I looked, Nirvana's Nevermind came out on the same day as this album. Like I remember really being, early 90s, I always remember this, late in high school to all the way to that point of me taking that little break between high school and college. That was really defined by grunge music. The radio, MTV, specific bands, MTV's 120 Minutes, Nirvana, Ned's Atomic Dustbin, The Breeders. Like I remember like really being plugged into grunge music before we even knew necessarily that it was called grunge. So this was something really different. And then I got to thinking of the Chili Peppers and I remembered that my relationship with the Chili Peppers started in 1987 with seeing them in 1986's The Seminal Film, Kyle, Thrashin'. Skateboard film, Josh Brolin. So the Chili Peppers play themselves on stage. Josh Brolin and his team of Valley skateboarders, the good guys in the movie, go to this club at night, and the Chili Peppers are performing on stage as themselves. And they're playing, I remember specifically, they're playing that song Black Eyed Blonde. And they're crazy at that point. Like Flea has the old school flight helmet and goggles on. And I think his bass is like made of stuffed animals and stuff like that. Like they're crazy punked out. And I remember like that was a crazy time for me being like 17. I had just back in 87, I had just started skateboarding and we were still trying to figure out because we were new to punk rock. We were new to this whole scene, to skating, to all this stuff coming over from LA, from SoCal and the West Coast, and trying to figure out what was cool. You know, trying to figure out what boards were cool, what colors were cool, what clothing brands were cool, what skateboard graphics were cool, what bands were cool. And I remember like thinking like I put everything in the same box at that point. It was like Sex Pistols, Dead Kennedys, the Ramones, Black Flag, Bad Religion, Chili Peppers. Like I put them all in the same category because it was all new to us. You know what I mean? And then in the next years, in the late 80s and early 90s, it would culminate and everything. We kind of get separated by political punk and more outrageous stuff. I remember even thinking like putting Jane's Addiction in the same category. Like we just didn't know yet. And I remember there were older kids that I hung around with that were 2 or 3 years older than me that skated that would kind of introduce me and be like, no, kid, like Rollins and Black Flag, that's the more political shit. And then Dead Milkmen and Chili Peppers are over here. Like they would all sort it out for me, these slightly older kids. But that was I always remember thinking the Chili Peppers were a little different because they always seemed very SoCal to me. And I think the vibes, like the energy, the high energy, the positive vibes and the fun was always like a thing with early Chili Peppers. And thinking like, all right, it's punk. Like it's something, it's a subgenre. It's different. It's not popular. It's not top 40. It's not a charting thing. And then in 90, you know, by the early 90s and being in my senior year of high school, seeing them like emerge as an arena band. Like they were just on the cusp of becoming like this big thing where those other bands stayed down in their little subgenres. The Chili Peppers broke out. I remember really thinking that, like, almost being proud in a way that they came from the surfing skating culture and kind of made it big. You know, they kind of made it into the limelight and still didn't seem like they were selling out or cheesy in any way. You know, they had that unique, really fresh vibe, even if it wasn't necessarily my thing. Like I was really immersed in hip hop by this point. By the late 80s, early 90s, it was Public Enemy, De La Soul, the Southern California gangster rap, Dre and Eazy-E and all that kind of stuff. And then the NorCal stuff was starting to break out with Casual and Dell and Souls of Mischief. And that's really where I was at. But I remember thinking like, yeah, man, I'm kind of proud of the Chili Peppers, even though I really didn't have anything to do with it because I came up in that culture when they were coming up and making it big. And that was a cool thing. But, you know, it was nice to go back into this album because I really wasn't listening to this kind of music late in high school. Again, it really wasn't my vibe. I was into really the grunge stuff and I was into hip hop music. So some of these songs, it was kind of cool to go in because some of these songs I don't even remember listening to, you know, aside from those 4 or 5 singles that were obviously huge, right? And made all these guys, these 4 guys, millionaires and billionaires and everything. So it was cool. It was really fun to go in and to see it was their 5th studio album. And they've been around since, they formed in like 83 or something, the Chili Peppers, right?
Yeah, early in the 80s. But what's interesting is that, because I don't know a lot of their very early stuff because it's basically a different band. I think Mother's Milk is when I really clued into the discography, not at the time because it came out when I was like 4, but but that's when the classic lineup of Kiedis, Flea, Chad Smith, and Frusciante were all together. And then you had that for Blood Sugar Sex Magik. Then Frusciante leaves for One Hot Minute. And that's when Dave Navarro comes in. And they don't even acknowledge that record, which is too bad because there's a few fucking bangers on One Hot Minute, including but not limited to Aeroplane, which is a really, really great song. And then that particular lineup, you know, Navarro leaves, Frusciante comes back for Californication, By the Way, and then, which is a kind of a forgotten record, I think. And then in between Californication and Stadium Arcadium, which was that double record they released. That was when double records were becoming big again. Foo Fighters released a double record at that time. A few others. What's funny is that Blood Sugar Sex Magik could have been a double record. It's long. It's Transistor, 311 Transistor is about this long, and they often talk about how it was basically almost too long, like where it had to be on another CD. And they're obviously great cost to manufacture to doing that, which is why, another example is, of course, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness from 1995, Smashing Pumpkins. A lot of bands were doing this, of course, 10 years earlier. So this Mother's Milk, Blood Sugar Sex Magik, I think those two records are stand out as being special to people, especially Blood Sugar Sex Magik, I think, because that's the classic lineup. Because Hillel Slovak died. That was their original guitarist. He died, I think, before Mother's Milk even came out. Jack Irons, who played drums in a lot of bands, and I think is connected to Pearl Jam or something like that, was their original drummer. So those first few records were different. I mean, it was funk rock and rap rock, but it was different. But I'm curious. It's funny because I remember this music contemporaneous, even though I was 7, 8, 9 when these singles were coming on the radio, and listening to it. There are so many good songs on the record, but I just kept coming to Give It Away, which I think is just such a awesome song and just such a great rap rock song with just an amazing, amazing composition. And I was thinking about the visual flavor of the Chili Peppers too, and how awesome that video is. I don't know if you remember that video, but it's when they're all painted gold and it's just like them and it's just them in the field and they're just playing and it's like dude, it's like a goosebump worthy video. I think like Flea is just ripped. Like he has like a 6-pack and he's just playing the bass. It's really low. And he's like walking into the side and like disappearing into the scene and then coming back into the scene. It's like a very wild, cool one-shot video with his face, like Anthony Kiedis' face rapping. And he's got like, the crooked teeth in the front, like his broken tooth, which is something that Billy Joe Armstrong would later do with Green Day. Kind of embrace that punk aesthetic. So I think that there's more. I also think about the famous, I think it was the Rolling Stone cover at this time when they had the socks on their dicks.
Yes.
Which is an awesome, absolutely awesome
with
photo.
Socks.
I wanted to replicate something like that when I was in a band, Paper Champ. I wanted to do a photo like that, where we were all naked.
That would have been an awesome send up.
Yeah, but we ended up not doing that, of course. But so what do you think about their visual flavor too? Because there is something about the Chili Peppers, like MTV-ish, really took advantage of that. Flea has been acting forever. Of course, he's a funny character in The Big Lebowski, one of our favorite movies.
That's right. Plays one of the nihilist dudes.
And there's crazy psychedelia and drug use. I mean, the Chili Peppers have a really bad history in provenance with drug use. I mean, John Frusciante has washed out 3 different times from the Chili Peppers. I mean, I don't think people realize, like, he was there for Mother's Milk and Blood Sugar Sex Magik, gone for One Hot Minute, back for Californication, and By the Way, and Stadium Arcadium, gone again, and then back now again.
Incredible.
So all because of his drug use, and I think that kind of plays into almost the thin line of craziness to like executed artistic psychedelia and all the rest. So what do you think about that element to them? Because that's what's more memorable about the Chili Peppers to me than some of their contemporaries, not necessarily in their genre, but at the time. I don't think Pearl Jam's, long hair, button down aesthetic, or Nirvana's kind of, dirtbag aesthetic. That's not as memorable to me as the Chili Peppers with their makeup and, Flea and all the, not wearing a shirt and all the rest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a really strong visual component to everything Chili Peppers, and it evolved. If we look back at Thrashing, for instance, they were doing something different, and they were always changing. There was a playfulness to it that I always thought was really fun and made it kind of accessible. Like even when I was young, like a young teenager, I remember being like a little scared of Black Flag. You know what I mean? Like a little scared of like the more serious political stuff that was very aggressive. The Chili Peppers were aggressive in a more colorful way, in a more welcoming way. And it always sort of encapsulated what I thought of Southern California, LA, kind of incorporated punk, surfing, that sort of Latino, SoCal, Vato vibe. Like everything about them seemed like a love letter to Southern California. Like I got that even before I think I even went to California for the first time and knew what LA was. I got familiar with that over the years. And so there was always an exotic thing about that was kind of cool. And then, like you said, like there was a pop, I think with MTV and Flea doing the acting thing and just the Anthony Kiedis' very unique image, the long flowing hair, always being shirtless, the colorful nature of things, wanting to do the album covers, but also wanting to do music videos that were visually interesting and exciting. There was something like they were really the first punk rock band for me that crossed over into, mainstream pop culture and became like household names. But they did it in this way where they seemed like they were still being genuine. It wasn't a sellout thing. And just like their music, they were incorporating all these influences. Like I remember seeing like Bad Brains, Zeppelin, Public Enemy, Rick James, James Brown, Frank Zappa. Like they just seemed to be doing all of it. It seemed like they really loved music and were so reverent to all these genres and were sending everything up. And then they did that, not with just their musical stylings, but just the way they looked and just, and that's the thing too. They had that element of, they were so solid musically, but they also were entertainers. They wanted to perform. They wanted to put on a good show. And it was always like, it always seemed like bang for your buck. And again, I wasn't like a huge Chili Peppers fan, but I always appreciated them because they were just marching to the beat of their own drum. Truly. They're truly the definition of that, especially I think in the 90s, and to see them come out of, the heroin addiction, especially Anthony Kiedis, right? And John Frusciante to some degree too. But to have, they seem to have a little bit of everything. I mean, we could even talk about like, was it the first true rap rock? You know what I mean? And then coming out of a true, like they really knew rap music. Like they really were channeling rap music. They weren't watching from afar and like, I could do that. Like Anthony Kiedis was a poet. I mean, he's essentially a beat poet, right? So he comes out of the same tradition as an Amiri Baraka rubbing off and then creating a KRS-One or a Chuck D. Like Anthony Kiedis is no different. He's of the same generation as the Chuck D's of the world. So they're really an interesting band. And when you look at it and just break down one album, this album specifically, you really get all of that. The history, the origins, and then how they've grown and evolved since then. And then it kind of all culminates out of this period, though. It was really cool for me to go in and really delve down. I never listened to this album back to front. I never had this album. So it was really cool to kind of explore that. And, just these four dudes playing this music that truly was different to everything else.
Totally. And I think the rap rock and the rap connection to this comes from Rick Rubin, who is the producer of this record. Now, of course, he's a metal producer too, so it's not like he just comes from a hip hop background, but he was a producer of a lot of very early 80s hip hop. And I think Chili Peppers is amongst the first rap rock bands. And that's why it's one of those things where, our sister Dana loves the Chili Peppers, just like she loves Rage, but then we'll say like, oh, I don't like rap rock or whatever. And I'm like, but what are you talking about? Like, that is what this is. This is that. I think about Urban Dance Squad and the Beastie Boys early records, which Rick Rubin also produced, and others as being maybe earlier rap rock in some way. But this is amongst the first, and certainly one of the most transformative albums in the genre. And it's funny because a lot of people won't listen to a lot of the stuff that came later, like rap rock that came later, but a lot of people will go to the early stuff and think it's totally fine, which I think is fine too. So I think that's part of where it comes from. And again, just also incredibly long. I think too long, if anything, this record. I like tight 45-minute records at most.
I agree.
Yeah.
Little over long. And maybe that comes down to some of the tracks just being a little too indulgent. But Rick Rubin, props. You have interesting timing with choosing this album because Rick Rubin and Anthony Kiedis were both very recently on Joe Rogan.
Oh, I don't think
And Anthony Kiedis is fascinating. He's so smart. He's so passionate. He's come through so much. Seems like such a down-to-earth dude for being this billionaire. One of the most famous people on the planet, right? I mean, really. And having that staying power. And then Rick Rubin being this guy who's just... He's Long Island's own Rick Rubin, by the way.
That's right. Yes.
Right? In fact, Anthony Kiedis talks about Rick Rubin and says like he's this chill dude, very zen. He's got this sort of musical expertise that everybody responds to, but he's still, I remember Anthony Kiedis saying this, I was so tickled by this. He's still Long Island Rick. Like, he still has that bad temper. He still gets like overly agitated and stuff like that. And I remember Anthony Kiedis saying that, like, it's still Long Island Rick in there somewhere underneath that beard, underneath that Zen master sitting up on the hill, Indian style, is still Long Island Rick. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that is
but
funny.
It was so cool just getting their stories as of recently. Both of those guys specifically, and Flea too. I listened to interviews with Chad Smith and John Frusciante too, but specifically Flea, Anthony Kiedis, and Rick Rubin. They're not only are they very talented in their own rights, and of course with music, but they're also very passionate about the craft of music, which I always respond to, no matter what you do, no matter what your talent is or what your passion is. I always respond to that. And they really, all three of those guys really come out of a very authentic place of loving music. And I think the money followed. They weren't in it for that. That came because of the talent, because of the vision, because of the cohesion and all of that kind of thing between the group. And
yeah, I think that's why, by the way,
right?
I think that's why John Frusciante left, is because part of the reason was he hated the attention.
The fame.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could see, you know what? I really, there's something about that I respond to, especially if you're doing something that means so much to you. And it's all about doing that thing, right? Pursuing your vision, executing your craft, your art, or whatever. And then the money is nice. Everybody would love that, right? But I think something about the fame must dilute the experience of just what you're in it for. You know what I mean? And must kind of water down or change in some way what you're showing up for each day. And John Frusciante is a guy I didn't know anything about. And just hearing other musical geniuses like Anthony Kiedis or Flea, Rick Rubin, talk about him in such a reverent way. Like, it was all like, he musically, like, that guy's up on the hilltop and we're down here. That was interesting for me. And I think maybe that level of musical genius, there's something that those people incapacitates those people about just getting along in life. You know what I mean? Like, they're almost haunted by their abilities, right? They're almost kind of, there's a cost to pay for being so good at something. And there's other components that are missing where that causes them to struggle with life, right? That genius, they think of like the Albert Einstein kind of effect, that eccentricity or inability to just do normal things or just get along normally in the world, that type of thing. So John Frusciante was an interesting one because I honestly didn't know anything about this dude before, preparing for the episode. And that was another thing. It was like, wow, this guy's really considered one of the best. And by other people that are among the best. So that's always interesting to me, that level of genius in your craft, especially with music, which is so foreign to me personally. That's another thing with this album, Kyle. I would love to just learn from you because you're a musician and you're plugged into that side of things. You have an understanding of the musical craft that I don't. And I think I see that. I can see it from afar in this album. Just listening to it, I see why it's so broadly appreciated. But that's another thing where I would love your opinion on things, and you're going to add a lot of texture to this conversation that I can't.
Yeah, I think thank you. I think the musicianship is a key component of it. And I do love the idea of the haunted musician and the haunted artist, which we talk about pretty often. And I don't know if it's too reductive in thinking like, well, people that are creative are uniquely tortured. I think it's rather, because I think everyone's tortured. I think the dude that like pushes paper is tortured too. I just think that there's something about the torture in an artistic person's life that is central to the output of the art. So you kind of have to like harness it. I don't know that the sad artist is making anything other than sad art because that's his experience. And so you get the most intimate vision of a person through what they're putting on the page or putting on the cleft or whatever.
Sure.
On the staff, I should say, whatever on a page there, or obviously playing it out. So, but what strikes me about the musicianship specifically in this album is it's John Frusciante's clean funk guitar is really awesome, and I love it. And this is an argument I used to have with people about the Police too, where they talk about Andy Summers and the guitars. I'd be like, dude, the most important part of the Police, as much as Andy Summers is awesome, is certainly, the drums and the bass. And I feel the same way about the Chili Peppers. No matter how good the guitar is, it all comes back to the drums and the bass. And it's funny because Chad Smith, I think, is actually somewhat underrated as a drummer. And you can hear it's something that Ramon and I talk about a lot when we talk about music, which we love, especially in rap style rock and all the rest, which is the pocket. This idea of you need to have a place for the vocals to be, and it's not going to be in these kinds of songs. It's not going to be informed by melody necessarily. You have to find a way to just get in. So when you think about Give It Away, which keeps coming up, the bass lines doom 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 doom. So now there's a melody suggested from that. Wah 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 wah. You could see like a singing over that or whatever with the funk guitar, but it's not that. That's part of the thanks, babe. That's part of the creativity of it that you know what I mean? It's not, I used to have conversations with that about, if that makes sense, with Damon Hatfield at IGN, where we would talk about songs that are, that copy the melody and the guitar and the vocals kind of share a place and a part where there's actually a pocket made. And that's that to me is the beautiful musicianship, is finding out a way to make Anthony Kiedis make sense in this funk pocket that you've made, with just really clean guitar. Sometimes they distort it and use wah-wah and all of that, but it's actually a pretty clean tone, and then just really awesome low end, a lot of slap bass and just really aggressive bass lines that are like loud. I mean, Rick Rubin obviously made these way loud. It's the antithesis of like when people talk about Metallica and Justice for All, I think is the record where like the bass is barely even in the record, and there's like entire documentaries about it. Like, where is the bass?
That makes so much sense when you say it that way. Yeah, and where is it?
And here it's boom boom ta boom boom ta boom boom ta. And it's just that rap feel.
Yes.
And that funk feel, it's fucking awesome. And that's why I texted you the other day when I was listening to Give It Away. I was like, this song is so good.
It holds up so well.
Oh my God, it's so good,
different. Dude. It's so different. I can't think of another. Does this make sense when I say it this way? And again, this is kind of my musical ignorance, but this is how I have to break it down in its broadest forms to simplify. Like, I can't even think of a band right now where it seems like all four musicians are of equal importance. Like, everybody has 25%. And of course the lead singer shines through, but I think of like everybody being just as important as the next thing. And I can't, like you said, I can't even think of another band coming out of reggae and ska and everything like that and different sounds, but I can't even think of another band where the bass is as important, as an essential component.
No, I would say sound. I would say that, I mean, people might, Rick James and all that kind of stuff. But I think that people would say that I would challenge anyone to name a band. I would agree in the mainstream consciousness where the first thing you think of is the bassist. And I would say that Flea is like the most notable aspect of the Chili Peppers by far. Everyone, even if you don't know anything about bass, and I love the bass. I play bass. I'm not very good at it. I'm self-taught. But I love bass. I'm way better at bass than I am at guitar. It's just way more natural for me. And you can really feel playing the bass, which really resonates with me. But it's a really complex instrument. And when you hear it played in ways that is extraordinary, bass is not meant to be slapped like that. It's not meant to be picked like that and all of those things, but he's doing it. And it doesn't miss a beat. It's an amazing kinetic sort of rhythm. And it's obvious. I think it should be obvious to anyone if you just listen to a standard rock song where you can barely even make out a bass line, and then you listen to this where it's just funk guitar and the bass is actually the prominent string instrument. You're totally right about that. 311 and other bands have prominent basis within their fan base, but it's not what you would know about that, you know? So yeah, I totally agree with you. Flea is the most famous person in the band, I would say. I mean, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would definitely say, like, when I think of the Chili Peppers, you think of Anthony Kiedis and you think of Flea. Like, you really do. Like, when there's been another time where that bassist is like a straight up front man. I love what you said about playing the bass too, Kyle, because in listening to the bass, there's something about that instrument and just the idea of bass in general. It brings so much more depth to the music because it's a part of the music that you could literally feel the vibration, the resonance. You feel it in your throat, you feel it in your body. There's a physicality to that piece of music, that part of the ensemble that is not only a big part of the sound, but I think gives it that energy. And I think about the Chili Peppers, and that's what it is, that energy. They have such a unique sound. They really do. But I think that really singular aural approach comes from those broad influences, you know, pulling in the funk, pulling in the rock, the hip hop, the reggae, the ska with a lot of the songs and the horns and the styles of music and the specific musicians that you know they're incorporating into their sound just comes out to be something like a recipe concocted of all these ingredients, very special. And those specific things coming in to form something that no one else has formed. Like they really are that singular. They really are unto themselves. No one else is like the Chili Peppers. You know what I mean? Like there might be copycats that have come since then, but they're really, what they're bringing to the table still now being so evolved. And what did they do? Like 2 albums in 2022 or something?
Oh, did they? I don't even know any of their new stuff.
I think they did, yeah. And, they're still going strong. They're still so musically driven. And it's not about money at this point. I mean, how much more money can these guys have? It's just about the love of, evolving as musicians and doing this thing together and creating their art, creating their music. It's so cool to go back decades and see where that really, well, they were already going for, over 8 years at this point. But, to go back to see where the success really started is so cool. And just breaking it down song by song. And again, just the fun and the playfulness and that lack of seriousness, you know what I mean? Like seemingly like chucking off seriousness, and just saying like, this is all about a good time, positive vibes, high energy, fast pace, but then they could go down and they could do the ballad, you know what I mean? And a very specifically uniquely flavored ballad, they could do, and this album, they could do everything. And this album is sort of like an emotional roller coaster, but definitely something I would say comes out optimistic, positive, hopeful, even in the face of drug addiction and dealing with the problems of fame and wealth and infighting in the band and all of that kind of stuff. It's not eschewing reality. It's embracing reality with a hopefulness, if that makes sense. I really get that through their music. And maybe it's because I'm watching these guys talk more recently about their younger years and making this album and making some of the other albums, Californication and all that kind of stuff, but really channeling what they mean by the music. And I learned a lot. This is probably the episode that we've done musically where I've learned the most about a band, and was rewarded for that because I kind of come out liking them even more, which is kind of neat.
Nice. Yeah. Californication is an amazing record too. Absolutely amazing. That record came out when I was in 10th grade, and that will always remind me of that era. I love Around the World. That's probably my favorite Chili Pepper song, the first song on that record. One. Yeah. Good rap rock jam. But I want to go into some of these tracks here. I'm curious. We don't have to go through all of them. There are 17 of them, but I was curious which ones stuck out to you. Is there one you want to kind of touch on right now?
I love coming into the album with the first track, The Power of Equality.
Yeah.
Because I remember this song, it jogged my memory when I started listening to it, but I forgot about it. And, you really come in with everything you're going to get from this album and from the Chili Peppers at this time. It's upbeat. It's funky. You got that telltale, twangy guitar. And of course, like we talked about, the distinctive bass picking, where the bass is isolated and even everything drops out and lets the bass kind of go off on like, bass solos, which is, very specific for me, at least, to Chili Peppers. And then the horns with that muffled trumpet, the ska elements coming in a little bit here and there. And of course, Kiedis rapping, the beat poet in there, the spoken word, and really sort of maybe it's interesting. I know Anthony Kiedis, especially early on, was really self-conscious about his singing and that he felt like he was more of a poet, and that's where the rapping came. And he learned to sing more melodically as time went on. But it's such whether you like it or not, whether it's your cup of tea or not, he really brings something different and that really eclectic sort of flavor of his vocal stylings, and that high energy, it's up tempo, it's quick based, it's jaunty. And I was listening to this first track, and it's so funny because I'm thinking like, you know what this sounds like to me? This sounds like a much more lighthearted Public Enemy track. And then they actually send up Public Enemy in the song. He actually says Public Enemy at one point.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah,
Enemy. It just makes sense. It's like a more optimistic Chuck D. Like that's really what it is. And a lot of times, especially I get very critical of hip hop because I really come at it, oddly enough, I'm just some kid from the suburbs, but I responded to hip hop very early on. As a now 48-year-old, I was pretty much on the young age sort of version of that. It's slightly older people that responded to hip hop like I responded to hip hop, but for some reason I just clung to it. And I thought a lot of stuff that sounded like this that came a little later, I kind of defined as corny, or I wrote it off. But I never thought that about Anthony Kiedis. Very rarely did I think that. It's very authentic. He seems like that's really where he comes from. And I think a lot of that, again, is that for some reason, for me especially, like that Southern California sort of resonance that he brings through it. It's embodying rap, it's embodying surfing, again, the Latino culture. I think of tattoos, I think of lowriders, I think of like just that whole Southern California aesthetic, which is so different than the East Coast. Any East Coast flavor you could think of, it's so different. I think it's still a little exotic to me because I spent so much less time on the West Coast, right? And I think there's something that they bring through not just Anthony Kiedis, all of them bring through the music that just seems so California to me. And it's part of the reason I really enjoy it because, again, it's kind of it's exotic. It just feels like palm trees. It feels like warmer weather. It feels like girls in bikinis and surfers and the Valley versus Venice and Dogtown and Santa Monica and that little rivalry and bikers and all that kind of thing. Like it just lowriders again, like the car culture, tattoos, the Southern California art scene, like all that lowbrow kind of subculture-y stuff that crosses over punk meets rap meets the Latino culture meets, you know what I mean? It just sounds the chinos and like everything about it. Like it's just really, it comes out through the music. I can't even think of another like band that does that really defines a place and a time and all the kind of conflicting cultures and all the flavor and all the excitement. So, and I get that through the first track. It's a proper lead into the rest of the album.
Yeah, they've always embraced that California flavor, obviously with the names of some of their songs and where they record and where they like to play and where they're based and all of that rest. So I totally agree. It has that feel. I love The Power of Equality. It's a great song. Hey, bada, bada, hey, bada, bada, hey, bada. I love that beginning and just the bass kind of boom, boom, boom. And then everything kind of comes together. Oh, wonderful song. Totally good choice. I wanted to talk to you about Breaking the Girl. This is the third track. This is kind of one of the more ballady songs. I've always loved this song too. How do you feel about this particular track?
Yeah, this was a great reminder, this track specifically, of how they could just switch it up tonally and stylistically. You go from something very upbeat, jaunty, quick paced, high energy, playful, you're having fun. And then you could go into something that feels a little more introspective and thoughtful. And they tell a story. Anthony Kiedis could tell a story. He does that on a few tracks on this album for me. The singing is much more melodic. It's slow paced. You could see he could put that more somber or melancholy vibe into his music and not just be rapping. and not just be, kind of put the sexual innuendo in a different context, and, it's very much this signature Chili Pepper sound still in this song. That's a little bit more of a ballad, if you will. But Anthony Kiedis is kind of switching it up, but you still have those musical things that define it as a Chili Pepper song. It still has that Chili Peppers flavor, but then you put something in, like in this song, they put a little flute in there. It almost sounds like a Renaissance-y in some way, right? It's really odd. It's like, oh, they're putting this thing in, but it blends with everything else that they're doing. And I don't know if that's them, if that's Rick Rubin, if that's kind of a collection of all of their talents making this work. But they could do a lot musically. It's hard for me to articulate as, again, someone who's not a musician, but I appreciate the levels of, experimentation, if you will. Like they're putting a flute in there. It's so weird. And it sounds like you're at the Renaissance fair. It sounds medieval in some way.
Yeah,
it's really strange.
love that too. I love that it's accompanied by like an increase in the drum, like the toms, the drums like increase at that point, and it becomes like much more flush, which is cool.
That sense of adventure musically.
Yeah.
Like there's just, let's try this, and it makes it into the album, and it does work. It does kind of blend seamlessly and, kind of melts away into the music, and it gives it, again, it like every track, the Chili Peppers have this very telltale sound. You can't argue that. Album to album, it's the Chili Peppers. It. It's defined by these things. You can name it in seconds. But then they'll build on that, and they'll introduce new things and then take things away for the next song. So it's not samey from track to track. It's still exciting to listen to. And they're trying things. They're not resting on their laurels. I appreciate that.
There's a couple of lines in the song that I really love too, that I think are just very, very well written and very illustrative. Say a lot with a little. Actually, the first line: "I am a man cut from the know. Rarely do friends come and then go." That's an awesome line. Says a million words with nothing. Tells you exactly who the person is. And then this line: "Raised by my dad, girl of the day. He was my man. That was the way." That's a really awesome line too, giving a little bit of instinct to how he was imprinted with someone else's experience and replicating that in the song. Really, really well written.
He can really write.
Yeah, he can. And it's funny because sometimes his songs are nonsense. And I've said that, I think, on the show in the past. And I think he's kind of given grief for that, especially on Californication, where it's like, what are you even talking about? But I think that it's not always that way. And that's why you have to, I think, be careful to inquire with every song and then go a little bit deeper. I also think he's just a much more complex wordsmith. And I think that he is willing to sacrifice clarity for style in a lot of different ways. The Stadium Arcadium title track from that double record, he said, there's a line in that I'll never forget because I don't know what it means. The first line in is it bells around St. Petersburg when I saw you is the first line. That's what the first line is. Bells around St. Petersburg when I saw you.
Huh.
And I was like, that's maybe nonsense and maybe just sacrificing for something interesting, or maybe it has a deeper meaning.
Sure.
And that line always stuck with me. I don't know why, because I'm not much of a lyric rememberer without reading them, so, but good. Yeah, this is a good song. Breaking the Girl, another single, I think one of 5 singles off the record.
Yeah. I think that's right.
What about Suck My Kiss? What do you think of this record? What do you think of this song? I think about mom and dad hearing this song for some reason on the radio, because this was another single, and not that I was with them or would have remembered, but it's clearly supposed to sound like Suck My Dick. And I don't know. Here's what's funny about the deep, deep sexuality in this record, completely overflowing with sex, this record. I never got it when I was a kid, even knowing that it was something forbidden, because Dana had the record, I think. And
okay. Yeah.
Blood Sugar Sex Magik. I remember that, it was on each side, like Blood Sugar Sex Magik on each side. And then it said Red Hot Chili Peppers around. And I was obsessed with it. And I knew it was like kind of forbidden, and I didn't really understand. Magic was spelled with a K, which I'd never seen before. But then you really get into the language and what I guess the songs are about. And it's like, geez Louise, man, I didn't really know. I was listening, Suck My Kiss in the car, Suck My Kiss with dad, going to hockey practice or something like that. So it's so funny how that really, because I haven't sat down and listened to this record all the way through in some time, and I was working out listening to it, and I was listening to it on my earbuds on other times, and I was just thinking to myself like, oh man, I don't know that I realize how pure sex this record actually is. It's so funny to me. What did you think about this song? And do you have the similar wonderances of mom and dad hearing this on the radio and being like, what? Like some woman driving through, you know, central Indiana with her boys, and it's like, suck my dick. Yeah.
It's true. It's one of those things. It's like watching the movie with the parents where the sex scene, the nude scene comes on. You just don't, it's that awkwardness. Right. But of course, I was 17. I was old enough to know that these songs were so sexual in nature, especially this album. I mean, it really hits you over the head with it. It's a big theme in the album, that very thinly veiled, barely veiled sexual innuendo all over this album. Like he doesn't even make much effort to cover it up. Like it's just kind of in your face. The sexualness, the intensity. It's aggressive, but again, like there's something Kiedis-like, there's something Chili Peppers-like that makes it kind of non-threatening. Like it's aggressive, but there's a playfulness into it. I don't know if it's that Kiedis's poetry or his writing. It could cross over from, you know, Robert Frost to something that's very Seussian, or like Shel Silverstein, very playful, silly. The rhyme meter is almost like a children's book sometimes, right? And he kind of has that playfulness or that innocence incorporated in there. So something aggressive just kind of comes out feeling fun, right? And that's what I always got from it. Like it never seemed like it was obnoxious in any way. It just seemed kind of like you're having a good time. But yeah, this was definitely one of the ones you didn't want to be in the car with your parents, because again, it's not like a song. Like I think of a rock song that tells a story about a one night stand or something, right? And it's kind of classy. It's classically written. It's written more like a novel, more romantic than anything that is venal or inappropriate in any way, right? But this is so in your face, you know. And again, Kiedis is coming with that. It's that aggressiveness, but playfulness. You got this driving and aggressive musical composition, but there's just something that comes off of like, and you can kind of envision them playing this on stage and jumping around. It's high energy. It's party music. You know, that's how it feels for me. It feels like party music. It doesn't feel rapey in any way. You know, it just feels like this is where they're coming. This is rock music, and maybe kind of channeling, you know, being a rocker, the fast life, the girls backstage, the drugs, the alcohol, all this kind of thing, embracing the positive sides of it. And then when you get into you kind of ebb and flow. And when you get into the downside of it, you might, you know, sing about a ballad or a lost opportunity in love, or fucking up, or ODing, even if you want to get super dark. So this album seems to explore both sides of that, you know, both sides of like being a rocker, you know, being famous, being, you know, traveling, touring, all that kind of thing. But yeah, this for me really defines 1991. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, how did they do this? Like this song, I'm not sure what it charted as ultimately in the United States, but I mean, this was a top 40 song, dude. Like, how did they do that? How did they pull that off?
Yeah, U.S. alternative airplay on Billboard 15 is the peak chart, and the single went gold. So
wow,
500,000 copies.
Wow,
sold.
Yeah, it was popular, man. I mean, this was, and you know, this is one of the songs from the album that'll be emblazoned in your mind. Like you'll never forget this one.
Yeah, it's funny how I think you keep using the word playful, and I never really thought about that particular descriptor for them, but I think it's true. And I actually wanted to say too, as we go further into the record, one of the things I wrote in my notes that I would be remiss not to bring up is I think the order of the tracks is really deliberate, at least it's obviously deliberate all the way through, but it feels really deliberate in the first 2/3 of it. I actually think the last third of the record or so, it's like, this can be over now. I feel like you're losing your energy.
Definitely.
Here. There are a couple of great tracks late in the record. Apache Rose Peacock is probably the best but it kind of loses its way there. But from when you go from the power of equality to If You Have to Ask, Breaking the Girl, Funky Monks, Suck My Kiss, and then I Could Have Lied, which is the next song we could talk about. I feel like there's just a great balance there, an exploration of different modes of music and different styles, different lyrical content, different lyrical delivery. So really cool balance there. And I wonder if that's Rick Rubin as well. Although I feel like if I were in a band, I would be obsessed with the order of the record. If it wasn't a concept album, I feel like you could mix and match. And it's something I used to love doing on iTunes, actually, was back when it was like new and fun on your iPod, was like taking like a record that you liked and then kind of putting it in different order, seeing if it worked.
That's great.
Order.
Yeah, can I do this better than Rick Rubin? Can I? I really thought of this on this album. It does seem very intentional, the order of the tracks, and it seems like they don't want you to not have a good time for too long. Like if they go on a down note, they want to tell a sadder story, get a little somber, do a ballad, they bring you right back up again. You know, you're not going to stay down there for too long. You're not going to have two ballads back to back. I don't know who would do that, but I'm just saying, like, it's very intentional to keep things upbeat and positive, it feels like, with the Chili Peppers. And I think that's what makes them the Chili Peppers, right? That's why they're so beloved. That energy and it's just good. It's good times. That's what I really associate with them. I used to, again, like if you look back at thrashing and they're playing Black Eyed Blonde, like that's crazy, like high energy. Anthony Kiedis is jumping into the crowd and crowd surfing. There might be some moshing. They evolved from that point, but it's still that same sort of, it's party music. It's well-crafted party music, but I always associate Chili Peppers with having a good time. I don't associate Black Flag or Bad Religion with having a good time. Although I love Bad Religion, but you know what I mean? Like Bad Religion, like I discovered more recently again. I was like, this stuff is really awesome. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Different things to say, different content, different tone.
There's a Bad Religion song I love called Epiphany. I don't know if you know that song.
I'll write it down. I'll check it out. Yeah.
That, it's like falling through a black hole. The lyrical content. It's like, oh my God, no.
That's a different trip. That's the opposite side of the spectrum, I feel like.
Yeah, they're
I appreciate
awesome.
It though, for different reasons. You gotta be in the Bad Religion mood.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Mood,
it's like the same thing with Black Flag and all that kind of stuff, like a more rebellious mood. I also for a long time felt hypocritical listening to those some of those bands after a while, because it's like, well, I'm more of a capitalist and they probably hate me. But then I realized they're all hypocrites. They're all signed to record labels and touring and making tons of money. We're all good. Everyone's good. It's the same reason why I came back to Rage Against the Machine after a while, because I felt so hypocritical listening to them for so long. And so I was like, I probably shouldn't be, really being such a huge fan of these guys. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But then you kind of rectify the reality that they're making a ton of money and being anti-capitalist while living a much more affluent life than I'll ever imagine.
Yeah, like easy for you to say type thing.
Right. So then I'm like,
it's nuanced. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That makes you a nuanced person. And that's what makes us interesting, my friend.
Perhaps so.
Yeah.
What do you think about this track, I Could Have Lied? This song's interesting to me because I feel like it's very visual. In the chorus, he says, I could have lied. I'm such a fool. My eyes could never, never, never keep their cool. I feel like that's a very visual line. I like the song. Another kind of softer side of Anthony Kiedis and a much more vulnerable topic than something so charged as a lot of the other song subject matter.
Yeah, it shows range. I wrote that. It shows emotional range and musical range and the ability and the ability to do something different and try something a little different, but also, the intention to do something like that, the wanting to do something like that. And it's a weird one. Like it has a little slide guitar in there. It's a little introspective, a little somber. Anthony Kiedis is singing with, apparent regret. And I wrote down that there's nothing really complex happening musically. It's all pretty straightforward and melodic, but it's unpretentious. And then you get into John Frusciante's guitar solo, and then that's where it kind of builds a little bit, and you get a little more something out of it. But it doesn't try to be too much. I get that on a lot of tracks on the album. It doesn't seem, it seems like they're dialing it back a little bit. Like they're learning how to be, I think I read something or listened to Flea say something about that on playing on this album. He learned how to dial it back and give the other musicians space. And like they were getting a little more sophisticated musically. Like I could see that in any art. You know, I could think about it in just an animation. Like you learn how to do all the tricks and you learn how to do all the self-indulgent stuff. And then as you get older, you learn that less is more, kind of, sometimes. And when to dial it up and when to ratchet it up and when to dial it back and all of those kind of things. And I get that from this song. I like that it's a calm, I think you said it, Kyle, like a softer side of Anthony Kiedis. And I like the emotion. You know, I like that sort of, you know, that you could kind of be a little more delicate and then you could bring it right back up with the next track and you could bring that energy and that zest and everything like that. But then you could go down here. The other thing I read about this song, I read about it in a roundabout way. I just found out supposedly Anthony Kiedis had a short-lived relationship with Sinead O'Connor, and this was about her. Which I thought I was like, whoa, I don't know. He dated a lot. Cool. Ione Skye he was with for a while. Like he dated a lot of who's in Hollywood, whether they're musicians or actresses. So that was kind of neat to learn that, you know, Sinead O'Connor and Anthony Kiedis. Can you see that? I'm not sure if I could see that.
That's like the Sinead O'Connor from the era of her ripping the picture on SNL. You know,
that's right.
Whatever, the Pope picture.
That would have been right in that. Yeah. Right, so right in that era.
Been common bedfellows, I think. Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, I could see it. It'd be very, very interesting. I love little tidbits like that. Although I also like when you don't know at the same time.
Yeah, leave it to your imagination type thing, you know.
Or put it together yourself or whatever, yeah. Give it away. I have to talk more about this. The best song on the record, I think. What do you think about this song, especially that it was the first single? So for a lot of people, this was the first Chili Peppers they ever heard. I think this is maybe why it's so iconic in my mind, like the video. And I remember it always being on MTV and the song was always on the radio when you were in the car.
Always.
But it's so funny to me, like people were so absorbent of this style of music. And then it just 10 years later, it was verboten. And I find that so interesting. And I wonder if it's just Anthony Kiedis himself can get away with it and just select few others. What do you think about Give It Away? And do you remember this song dropping at all?
Like, I remember this song being everywhere. You turn on the radio, it was playing. You turn on MTV, it was playing. The video was playing. Like it was just this song more than any other song probably of their whole, you know, all of their albums, all of their music over time. I think this song maybe more than any other always defined the Chili Peppers for me. And that maybe that's just the sheer saturation that we heard it so many times, but everything about it, you know, the aggression mashed up with the silliness, the thinly, barely, not at all veiled sexual innuendo, which I always took from this song, but supposedly it's not about that.
That's so crazy.
How could it not be?
Yeah.
Right?
What I've got, you got to give it to your mama. What I got, you got to get it, put it in you.
I mean,
come on, man.
This was one, and again, like a lot of Chili Pepper songs, this is one you'd rather not hear when you're trapped in the car with your parents, right? Like, it's just a little over the top. Like any 14 or 15-year-old knows exactly what they're saying. You know, that fast-paced, almost manic motor mouth delivery, the punk meets funk really shines through on this one. Like everything Chili Peppers culminates in this song. I think this was very much a definition of Chili Peppers circa 1991 going into 1992. It really defines not only music for me, it just feels like early 90s to me. It just, everybody liked it. That's another thing too about the Chili Peppers, Kyle, that dawned on me. I never really heard anyone complain about the Chili Peppers. You know, it might have not been everybody's cup of tea, specifically maybe older people at that time. But I never heard anybody be like, shut that shit off. Like everybody seemed to be having a good time when the Chili Peppers came on, you know, and maybe that is the musical, you know, what they're capable of musically, that level of, you know, musical skill, talent, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's good time music. It's party music. That's what I want from the Chili Peppers. You know, they could do other things again, but that's really what I like about a Chili Peppers song. That's the energy that they bring. It's just it's not shallow, but it's fun. It's fun.
Oh, it's super fun and silly, and again, the music and Give It Away is just the beat. Like when this song, I just can't just listen to it. You got to really like rock out to the song. Boom, boom, boom. The guitar in the beginning, just like that, and it's just the drums setting it up, and again, finding a pocket with rap, over pretty complex music. Boom, 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 boom. Give it away, give it away, give it away now. Really, really wonderful, lovely, fun. I don't know, and I love the line because I have no idea what he's talking about. How come everybody want to keep it like the Kaiser? Sure,
you know what else they did, Kyle? Yeah. That no one else, I can't even think of another band. You correct me if I'm wrong, or if you could think of another band, but they embraced funk music as white boys and really tried to do it like Rick James, like James Brown, or Earth, Wind and Fire, Marvin Gaye, Al Green, like Kool and the Gang, all these notorious, wonderful, right? Everybody we think about when we think about funk music, Parliament and Funkadelic, right? They really did it. They took a chance and did it. And then combining with the rap music, they really were channeling black music, and they did it well. Again, does that speak to the musical fortitude, their abilities, their courage to even go down that path when, maybe they wouldn't have it? They were a rock band. And, being able to pull it off successfully really did give them that leg up and make them sound like no other band. Incorporating those funk elements, that twangy guitar, the meter, the drum, letting the music shine through, sort of that high pitched, high level stuff. Like, it just, no other rock band did that I could think of. I wonder why, because so many bands were inspired by that. You look at Sabbath, Zeppelin, the Stones, the Beatles, like nobody really, they all loved that music, but they weren't really bringing it into the fold like the Chili Peppers were. And I wonder why. I wonder why it took the Chili Peppers to really do that. And again, if I'm forgetting of a band, you guys got to correct me if I'm wrong. But the Chili Peppers really, it always seemed like half punk. At this level, punk was crossing over into rock, and the other half was funk. And there was this 50-50 dynamic going on where that funk is really center stage.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what some of those seminal funk artists would think of the Chili Peppers too. Like when you hear it, when you listen to it, one of these maestros of the genre, you must immediately hear it, and I wonder what you think of it, because it's so unapologetic and it's quite well done. I mean, I don't know if,
really well done.
So I wonder if they hear that, especially also with the hip hop. Like I would wonder what a hip hop head in 1991, 1992 would think of Give It Away when they hear that, or they see that video. Like, what do they think of this? Do they appreciate it? Or is it something that's, because this is so much closer to the genetic origins of hip hop than both hip hop and rap rock would become later. And one of the interesting things, because I wanted to bring up this about Chili Peppers, is it's so much different than what would come to define the genre later from 311, Rage, although a little less Rage, Linkin Park and Limp Bizkit later, certainly, which is just power chords and distorted guitar. 311 has clean guitar and they have ballads and all that, but a lot of it is distorted power chords. That's why I can play a lot of 311 songs, because the rhythm guitar in a lot of 311 songs are the same 25 assortment of literally 25 or 30 chords. Like anyone can play them,
Okay.
Like down it. Like anyone can play that. That's like the easiest guitar song. I can give you a guitar and you can play that in 2 seconds. This playing funk and playing it with a clean tone and not muddying it requires a higher sophistication of guitar playing. They make a lot of noise for a one piece. A lot of that comes from the bass tone, I think, which is both really loud on the mix and I think a little distorted in a lot of songs. Bass is usually rendered clean and guitar is usually rendered distorted. Now, I'm not saying they don't distort the guitars. They do that too, but I'm surprised by how much noise and how much grit they get out of such a clean tone. It's the antithesis of what comes later with the genre. If you listen to Rage, is a little bit weird because Tom Morello is really a maestro with the guitar, very avant-garde style guitars with like that almost sound like, I don't know if you remember, they used to put on the back of their records like, this album has been made without the assistance of keyboards or turntables.
Oh no, I never knew that.
Because people used to think that they were like using turntables, but it's him on the guitar scratching, you know? And it sounds like a scratch on a guitar.
Holy shit, I don't think I ever realized that.
And, you know, that's that Harvard education for Tom Morello, I guess.
Mm-hmm,
but when you get to 311, like I was saying with muddy guitars and power chords, Limp Bizkit certainly, although pretty sophisticated music for what it is. And then you get to Gent and all the shit I like now, like Hacktivist and all like the ridiculously hard rap rock I listen to, or it's like where the guitar has 9 strings on it. That's so far away from this. And I think that that's why this was so accessible. And I also think it's why the Beastie Boys rap rock era was also, which was around this time, also was so palatable to people when you think about Sabotage or something like that. Sabotage is a rap rock song. In fact, one of the great performances of Sabotage is on Letterman. If anyone has never seen the Letterman performance of them playing Sabotage on Letterman, you gotta check that out.
Oh, I've never seen that.
It's dope. Paul plays the keyboards along with, you know, he's always playing always playing with the band, which I love about that.
Hell
like,
yeah.
I would have taken full advantage of that. So anyway, yeah, that's what I appreciate about the balance in both the tonal balance in the Chili Peppers performances here in Blood Sugar Sex Magik, the track order, and then just kind of the diversity of sound. Because the reality is that like what comes later really funneled in on the rock. I feel like, and that's great. Because I've said to you, and you know how I feel, I think rap and rock are bedfellows, like straight up, they belong together. And it's so strange that more people don't see it for what it is.
Absolutely.
You know, and
chocolate and peanut butter, man.
But it has been taken to the extremes, which I think is like more thrashy.
Sure. That's a great way to put it.
And that's awesome. But I love that shit. I do. Like that's the shit I get. I get crazy behind closed doors here when I listen to music sometimes.
Hell yeah. Even if it didn't work, you have to try it, right? And there's so many ways to make it work. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you could have Public Enemy and Anthrax do a duet.
I was just thinking that. That's so funny. Right? Yeah,
it does make sense. But why not Chili Peppers and Public Enemy? It's a different thing. And I wonder, because again, do you think of Chuck D and the political sort of nature of Public Enemy and everything like that? But they also had the fun side. You know, they also had, you know, the hype man. They had the Flavor Flav and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Public Enemy and Chili Peppers just makes sense. You know, but it seems like Chili Peppers were definitely sending up Public Enemy, but it didn't wash the other way. And I don't know, you know, and again, who knows what that's all about. But yeah, it is interesting to see that never think of any political rap of the 80s into the 90s, you know, KRS-One, you could think of like Boogie Down Productions. I mean, you could even think of things like EPMD in that same mold. You know, there's a lot you could have done there. It's funny that kind of rap music didn't have the lasting power. Like hip hop has evolved so much. That's another conversation, but it is interesting to think about how hip hop music, you know, that political rap that we had in the early 90s, it's not the same as it is today. It came to be something different.
Hip hop, we'll have to have a conversation in the future maybe in the near future about the evolution of hip hop, because you and I both love hip hop. And
definitely.
I've always loved it. I never really thought twice about it. I thought there was a time in my life where I wasn't supposed to or didn't like it because I was supposed to like rock, you know? And then that was when I discovered things that fused them both together and became to accept that I actually liked rap. And so it's never really been an issue for me, but it has changed so much. And I actually like a lot of modern hip hop, but what I like about modern hip hop is different than what I like about old hip hop. What I like about modern hip hop is that it's funny. Now, I'm not saying that old hip hop isn't funny, but I think that the hyper concentration on how many women you slept with, how many drugs you've sold and done, all these things, I think it's intentional. I think it's supposed to be over the top most of the time, and I think it's funny. And
bling. The bling thing is just,
these dudes are just like the things they're rapping about when you hear how they rap about them and some of the wordsmithing and all that and what they're saying, which is nothing, is
it's vapid. It's
totally
awesome. Vapid.
One of my favorite rappers is, you know, more contemporary rappers is Currency, who I've loved for, you know, 10 or 15 years. But he's always just rapping about cars and planes and money, but it's really sophisticated, you know. It's a more sophisticated type of rap, but it's not really anything substantive. He talks about how much weed he smokes, you know. And I just think that that's funny. And I think that there's an inherent humor in African American culture generally, and we've talked about that a little bit on the show. I think there's a laugh if you know, or you'll cry kind of thing going on.
Sure.
With
well said.
And I think that has translated into a lot of different Black art forms, and it's peak in hip hop. And I think that that's funny, but it's different than this. And it's funny you bring up Anthrax and Public Enemy. I mean, Bring the Noise is awesome. I love that song.
Oh, it's so good.
But there's but Run DMC and Aerosmith.
Sure.
That is more equivalent to this, I think. And I think that or Anthrax, I was gonna say Biohazard. It's definitely not Biohazard. It's way harder. Anthrax. Shout out to Biohazard though, Brooklyn band. Anthrax and Public Enemy. That's more like the 311 of, in my opinion, or like the Rage Against the Machine, harder, a little less radio friendly version of that. Like the Aerosmith thing is the more radio thing.
Definitely. Rick Rubin might have been behind that, actually.
Yeah, he may have.
He may have been behind that.
Let me see.
Run DMC Aerosmith thing, which is really cool how that came about.
He produced, let's see. Oh, he was producing LL Cool J, Beastie Boys, Run DMC, Jazzy J.
That's
and
right.
Then he was doing Slayer at the same time, which is so funny. Let's see, Public Enemy. Yeah, he did all the Public Enemies in the 80s, Public Enemy records in the 80s, and Run DMC records.
He was there early because he was.
So both of those fusions probably went through him, and I would imagine that's because he liked Anthrax, and I would imagine it's because Aerosmith. He might have known Anthrax through Slayer,
maybe. Yeah.
And then, I guess the Aerosmith thing, I mean, that's much more Aerosmith, Run DMC. I mean, that was anyone with a fucking brain should have come up with that idea in a boardroom. You know?
I will say about Rick Rubin, though, that's that Long Island sensibility. Really, honestly, that speaks to me. Just embracing everything. Doesn't matter race, cultural, style of music. Like if it's good, it's good. There's a very Long Island-esque sentiment at the heart of that for me. And, where he comes from, could be a really big part of that, of just like, it doesn't matter. Like you could cross these things over. Good music is good music. And the good musicians were inspired by everything, it doesn't matter what it is. You could take a little bit of something from everything and make your own pastiche, make your own mosaic. So I appreciate that very much, to be able to have that kind of vision. Somebody had to do it, right? But maybe if Rick Rubin and the other players involved weren't involved, who knows how long it would have taken, right? So he was on the cutting edge of that. Totally,
because I'm looking at some of this stuff now. Original Concept, that was Dre's outfit from Long Island. He produced their first record too, and okay. I just think it's interesting. So, because imagine the respect that you must have. There's no territorial, not that you can be really territorial about a contractor, and obviously he's very much in demand, but everyone seemed to be cool with him being like, well, I'm doing Slayer now. And they're like, cool, man, you want to come produce the next Public Enemy record? And then when he's doing Public Enemy, they're like, you want to come do the next Slayer record? And that seems to be quite a sign of respect and versatility for sure. And you know who else is on his production list here? Is Andrew Dice Clay.
No.
He produced all of his records, like all of his comedy records, including his live show.
From Long Island, or is he from one of the boroughs?
He is. He's from
the island. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh my God, dude, that's amazing. And I wonder what it is with Rick Rubin. Like, was it just getting in the studio with him and the music coming out, having that golden year and the music coming out really good and the band says, oh shit, this really does sound good? Or was it the financial payoff and the success of something? He does a project, it goes out, it does really well. And then it's like, oh shit, like this dude's got the golden touch. This guy's got the Midas touch. Or is it a combination of both? I don't know. I know they say he's a very open-minded guy. I like listening to him talk about music. It's almost scary because he seems to have a singular fixation on music. Like he seems obsessed with it.
Yeah, obviously. And I mean, you have to be
to be that level of not only success, but genius, I guess, right? It scares me though, because I'm like, there's something about a little bit of part of that in me with art where it's like, and I don't take it to this degree, but I always get scared for the people in those people's lives. Because I'm like, he doesn't pay attention to anybody. Like it's all about what he's good at and passionate about. So when I hear him talk, it's fascinating. But at the same time, I'm like, oh shit, like this guy's just fucking ignoring. Like how many marriages does this guy have? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. But I always get a little nervous about that. I'm like, were his kids completely neglected? Just sending them off to private schools or something and seeing them at Christmas type thing.
I just think you have to let the geniuses work, man. Their pain
can't shut it off.
Is part exactly. I feel like the choices, like the drama. He's working 18 hours and I'm just using his, I don't know anything about him, but he's working 18 hours and his marriage is falling apart behind the scenes. Like, and that energy is in, Run DMC's 4th record or something like
that. Those platinum plaques hanging on the wall or whatever.
That's like where he funnels himself. So
it is interesting though, man. It's so fascinating. I just love reading about these people, listening to them talk. Like when they have when that passion just shines forth, it's just that authentic passion in that one thing. It doesn't even matter what it is. With music, I appreciate, I can't speak to it, but yeah, no matter, it could be woodworking, it could be knitting, crocheting. I don't know. If you really are all about it on that level, I'm down. Like I'll read the novel, I'll watch the 2-hour documentary. There's something about that's, that kind of lust for life, that thing that you wake up for in the morning, and I think there is a big element. That's why we're talking about these albums. We talk about Sgt. Pepper's, we talk about, Dark Side of the Moon, we talk about Blood Sugar Sex Magik. Like there's something in these albums that it's a culmination of that genius, the vision, the passion, wanting to do something of exceptional quality, compared to the mediocre things that we'll never talk about on this show, which there are many. And let's be honest, I've been part of many of those animated versions of those things, not because of my lack of, not because of hopefully not my mediocrity, but just because that's life. That's 99% of what gets turned out, whether it's a film, a TV show, an animated series, an album, whatever. A recipe, a food product. It doesn't matter what it is.
That's the unfortunate reality of doing these shows for yourself, is if they suck, it's my fault.
There you go. A podcast, absolutely.
If anything sucks, it's my fault.
Mediocre podcasts, I'm sure this applies to Last Stand Media, but specifically KnockBack, which I could speak to. It's not because we didn't try. It's definitely not because we didn't try. I can say going on 300 shows, that's not that. That's what I'll say is that, what's funny is that, do you know that KnockBack is very easily in the top 1% of podcasts listened to in the entire world? Very, very, so very easily. But it's still really small compared to a lot of other podcasts, even in the space that do this other thing. You just have to, I like saturated. Doing things for small. Yeah, it's saturated, but I also think it's hard to find people get, think about your own behavior and how you discover things. I discover things by total happenstance. I'm never really looking for anything. So, and I get messages from people that discover the show that way. Yeah.
But that is the way that it is. It's funny. There is no removal from the failure for me. If like things, this is all about, this brand all runs through me. So it's going to be my fault if and when the fucking airship bursts into flames and slowly sinks to the
humanity.
Ground. Oh no. Oh no.
That's a lot rested on your shoulders, but you should sleep well at night knowing that you always bring the A game. That's important to you. That's important to deliver a quality product to the people that are taking the time to listen, that do tune in, do spend their hard-earned time and sometimes money, Patreon supporters, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shout out.
So yeah, that's so you should, that head should hit the pillow. You should be able to sleep well at night because of that, But then not everybody has that. But that's what separates the, the wheat from the chaff. From the shaft.
From the shaft. Gross. Yeah, I always tell people that luck and timing, huge parts of success. But you always want to at least do your best. Like I don't roll up to a podcast unprepared. I don't want to be the worst part of a podcast. Like if I'm often the worst part of a podcast, but I don't want to be, So I at least try to I try to like, I write my notes and I try to keep things in order and try to be on a schedule and do all those things. Because it is important. People trust you to deliver these things on that certain cadence.
Yep.
But anyway, one last thing I wanted to talk about before we went away, unless there was anything else you wanted to say, was we have to bring up Under the Bridge.
Oh, of course.
I was mentioning how Give It Away was the first single and it sold 500,000 individual units going gold in the United States as a single. Under the Bridge sold 12 times more as a single, went 6 times platinum when it came out as a single. And this song was obviously completely ubiquitous. And I was seeing this just here on Wikipedia. They just have some interesting statistics. Decade end charts. So Nielsen Music says the US top airplay spins for the decade of 2010 to 2019. Under the Bridge was the 9th most played song.
Wow.
On radio, period.
Wow. I can remember that though.
Yeah, this song was, I think, the 3rd single, and it came out, obviously it was on the 91 record, but it was a single in 1992. What do you think of this song? Anything to say?
It's a timeless song, man. I could see it, 1991, 1992. It's played over and over again to death. You probably turn off the radio, put on MTV, it's playing again. There was such a shameless nature of 1980s and 1990s pop radio where they would play a song every hour. You know what I mean? So they would fit in with commercials. You got to understand, they might play 6 or 7 songs in an hour. So this was playing every 6 or 7 songs, and they would do that. I think of like WBLI in New York, WPLJ, like the pop stations. They didn't care because they just wanted the ears tuned in, and they knew what people wanted to hear, whether it was Duran Duran in the 80s or the Chili Peppers in the 90s. But I will say that this song just never gets old. It's one of those great songs, and I can't talk about it musically too well, what makes it resonate, but I'll tell you what I responded to and what always struck me, even as a kid, is that it's one of those early songs that I can remember that was a real love letter, a real heartfelt love letter to a place, specifically talking about Los Angeles in this one. But I remember always being moved by that, even as a kid, by how much you can love a place, how much you can need a place and depend on a place, and how much like that's the place for you. And then thinking back retroactively, like I hadn't even known that for myself at that point. I was 17. I always lived in the same place. I still hadn't had that opportunity to know other places yet or what that felt like. I just knew the place I was from. I didn't know enough or live a life enough yet to miss the place I'm from or to find a new place to fall in love with. But that's still the notion of this song, and the meat of this song still resonated with me and translated emotionally, which it's really interesting. And it's kind of cool that you could have this fun, funk, upbeat, high energy, fast paced band that's all about party music, and then be able to go down and sing this heartfelt ballad that seems to come from a real authentic place of loneliness, longing, regret, whatever it is. And that Kiedis could pull that off. Anthony Kiedis might not be your cup of tea. He's not a Paul McCartney. He's not David Gilmour. He doesn't have those smooth vocal stylings. He's not bringing that, but he's not a Robert Plant. But he's got that thing where he's got, I guess that heart of a poet really comes out, whether he's being jaunty and he's being silly, or he's down here and he's telling you about he's feeling bad. And that's pretty cool. There's not too many frontmen or lead singers that I could think about that could pull that off like Anthony Kiedis could pull that off. And I think that says a lot. I think that probably is a big part of their success and why people resonate with their music.
When you hear songs and you're like, oh, that would be so much more relevant if I was there, or I was in a place, or I was in a space, or whatever. And then when you hear the song in that time and space, you are aware of it. This was one of those songs when I lived in Los Angeles, and then you'd hear Under the Bridge and be like, oh, it's about actually this place.
Yeah,
it's not. And I'm here and I understand it a little bit. And he describes the song, or he describes the city in very sad tones, which Los Angeles is to me a very sad place. I don't know. I think it was only being detached from it and really getting to know it from afar again that I came to that conclusion. I'm like, this place is, everyone's dolled up, everyone's beautiful, Santa Monica, everyone's hot, you go to hot Hollywood, but it's all fake and nonsense. And you start to know people behind, you start to know people and those people behind the scenes. And you realize there is like just an overwhelming, like sad vibe to LA for me these days, where I don't feel that San Francisco is different. I lived in San Francisco for a lot longer, but San Francisco is also sad, but it's sad because it's losing what it was, which was awesome. And LA, I don't know that so when I hear, it's funny to hear him celebrate his love of the city. And I know so many people that love LA, and that's great, but I don't see it. Having lived there too, it's like, I don't get it. It's hot, stifling, and the air is bad quality, and the government's corrupt, and the police are corrupt. And, it's like, what?
You lived there a long enough time too to really make a true judgment for yourself.
I think so.
It's not like
3
you were
years.
there for, that's a long time. That's a proper sampling of a place. That's enough to know.
And 10 years in San Francisco. I definitely know San Francisco.
Yeah, dude, that's a long time. That's a decade.
Yeah. So
So you made that's a proper litmus test. But again, like that strikes me what you just said. I always think, I don't think New York is a sad place, New York City, Manhattan specifically. I think it could be, despite the amount of people, the population, the hustle and bustle, the amount of activity, I find New York City a very lonely place.
Yeah.
I don't find it sad. I find it lonely for myself. And I never connected, even though we have a history with Manhattan, right? Our grandfather owned a business there, owned a salon in Manhattan, downtown. Our father worked on the World Trade Center, worked in New York, worked in Brooklyn as a firefighter, but we have a connection with New York City. And I worked there for many years. Most of my career, I worked in New York and made a career there. And I always found it never translated to my heart. I never adopted it as my city. As much as I love it and appreciate it and I'm proud of it, I find it lonely. I responded more in an emotional way to Philadelphia. I just found Philadelphia more accessible. And so what you say about LA really translates. I could see why people love it. I always used to criticize, when I was a kid, I used to criticize LA for having no culture compared to the East Coast, and being proud of, the whole trifecta of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and what that meant to me. And knowing each city a little bit, and some more than others. I didn't know New York as well, Boston as well, but always being very proud of that, very East Coast, right? And saying LA has no culture. LA does have a lot of culture. It's just different, and I when I lived there briefly as a young man, it wasn't for me, but I appreciate it more now, because it's not New York, but that's the cool part of it, I think. But it's not for everybody. And I'm not even sure LA would be for me. I don't know about that. It depends where I was, but you know what I mean? Like it's cool to see somebody. It's like Sinatra singing New York, New York, right? It's like, it's a love letter to a place. And whether it's for you or not, whether it's your cup of tea or not, like that sincerity, that true love for that place really comes out in the song, comes out in the nature of the music and the vocals. And I just can't see getting tired of that song. And, the rest of the album is funny. I wrote everything about the rest of the tracks, 12 through 17, but how do you follow? That's the tough thing about a great song and a great album. How do you follow up? How do you follow Under the Bridge? It's such a good song. It's melancholy, yes. And maybe you're on board the Chili Peppers train for something else, but I don't even want to get back up after Under the Bridge. I'm ready to stay down there. You know what I mean? Because it's so good. It resonates. It's an emotional experience. It brings back memories. It's nostalgic. That adds another dimension because it's from, my high school days. But man, I don't, there's a lot to say about the other tracks that follow it. But that was the problem for me on the album, is that do you put this song later? Because everything else is going to pale in comparison.
I think it's at a place, and both positionally, it's the 11th track, and in terms of time, where it could be the end of the record. And I think that would have been a really awesome way to end the record. But obviously there are people like these other songs as well. But with Under the Bridge, it's interesting. Nothing made me, as I sometimes say, nothing made me miss Boston like living in San Francisco. And nothing made me miss San Francisco like living in LA. And I think it just told me that there were different things that I was looking for and wasn't looking for in these different places. But I will say, to me, New York has an intimidating vibe, I think, for a lot of people.
Definitely.
It still intimidates me a little bit. I'm very familiar with New York.
Intimidates me.
Yeah, it's like, it's hard not to I think it's funny when people don't understand that New York and to a much lesser extent Chicago have parts of their cities where it's like, no, this is a real city. This is a city. Look up and all you see are huge buildings. It's not like Charlotte or Richmond. God, I mean, not even. And New York's just one of those places that reminds you how small and infinitesimal you are, which I guess goes into the loneliness that you were saying for sure. Because I mean, imagine not knowing anyone in New York. Now that's a lot of people, but what I'm saying is imagine living in New York, but not knowing anyone.
Oh,
like how can that be? You know, how can that be? And living a lonely life, living a somber life, but being reminded of life so much in so many different ways. I think that's really difficult. So I think that just increases. Like the only city like New York I've ever been in that's even more like New York is Tokyo. I mean, that's the only city where it's like, oh my God, how big this place is huge.
It's overwhelming, right?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like I said, I went to a bar with the top story of a building and you could just see the city in all directions. It didn't stop. Like you couldn't, nuts. There was no end. There's the Bay of Tokyo and there was like Mount Fuji or whatever it is. But there was like, I was like, this place is, there's so many stories here. This place is insanity. It's just absolutely nuts going on here. LA to me, I love people's love of Southern California. I think there is a lot to love there. I don't think that it's in LA though for me. I think, you know what's a cool city? San Diego.
Yeah, everybody said I never got down there. Yeah, you love it. Mom loves it.
Yeah, she loves it as well. Yeah. Oh yeah, I used to go down there all the time because my good friend, that friend of the show, people might know, Eric Castro, lives down there and owns a couple bars down there. And when I was in LA, I used to just go there because it was an hour drive or 90-minute drive. But when I was in San Francisco, I used to fly to San Diego all the time because it was like $100 flight or whatever. And
how long is that flight?
A little over an hour.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, he's still down there, Eric.
Yeah,
he's still in San Diego. Okay, yeah,
and
good guy.
He'll be at the wedding, so you'll see him. But
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. That's great news.
We'll have some good people there, but yeah, as far as Under the Bridge is concerned, yeah, lovely song, obviously mega popular, overplayed for sure. But there are musical features I love about it. I love the rim shots on the snare. Whoa, the rim shots on the snare. Like where together we cry, and it's like dot 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 dot. I just love that, and then the hi hat comes in, a little bit of bass drum, which is nice, and then I love the call and response at the end. Under the bridge downtown, that's where I drew some blood. So I like that part of the song too.
It's the only song on the album with female backup singers, right?
I think so. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
And I was looking at the players. I was always interested to see who else played on a record. They really have no other. They have some people, a guy playing some keys and stuff, but there's not a lot of like crazy instrumentation outside of some percussion.
Just the four of them,
and a couple of horns.
Yeah,
which they played. Flea is actually cited as the player of the trumpet on.
Yeah, he's an accomplished trumpet dude, as far as I know. I think he went back to school for it or something.
He's so weird. He's
a weird dude. He stopped for 2 years. He stopped doing the band for 2 years to go to, I believe, USC to pursue like musical theory and specifically the trumpet. You're already a multi-millionaire, if not billionaire guitarist, like one of the most famous bassists in any band ever. And you go back, you call an audible, like listen, we need a 2-year break. I'm going back to school.
Do you imagine how humble that's how humble that is?
That's crazy.
I always appreciated that when I listen to 311 and give interviews, and they often say that they still take lessons to this day.
They
still take lessons with like master level players, and they learn new techniques and try to incorporate that. And I'm like, that is so humble, because the second I figured out that I could write most 311 songs with power chords and do all those kinds of things and just splash that other stuff in and no one really would care anyway, I'd be like, I'm fucking done. And I mean, that's honestly, I don't have that kind of humility, because I'm not going back to school for anything. Like, it's like,
been there, done that kind of thing.
To me, it's just, I don't know. I really love that you really have to, the reality, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like it would be. Flea is probably certainly more accomplished than the people that would be teaching him at USC, but probably has really nothing to learn from them compared to what they have to learn from him. You would think, and yet you still sit there in the classroom and learn the things and take them into account anyway. I think that shows just a complete level of the love of learning, which you gotta appreciate.
And a true passion for that thing you do. And something, like this inability or this resistance or refusal to rest on your laurels, right? Like, say I have all this success, I have this massive fan base, people are going to come out and buy my album and come pay hundreds of dollars for tickets to my show no matter what I do. I could stop right now. I can never evolve musically one iota and subsist successfully for the rest of my life. But it's the driving force is the thing. It's not the money. It's not the fan base. It's not the stuff. It's something, there's something that really talks to me about that. And, just that evolution or that inclination to evolve that way is really the driving force behind, I don't know what makes it fun or makes it exciting, that reason to wake up in the morning, whatever. But yeah, I really admire that too. He's a smart dude, Flea. He's a really smart dude. It was cool listening to all of them talk and share their stories. And, he runs a really like a school of rock style music school. I think it's over 2 decades now that he started in Southern California somewhere. Very successful, like a place to teach kids music. I don't know if it's specifically underprivileged kids. It might be. But, he has a dean and a huge building and, multiple rooms where you could do private lessons or jam together, and you play a variety of instruments and learn musical theory and all this kind of crazy stuff. Like, and he said he did this at one point. Just, I don't know, man. I mean, you could speak this a little more because you're kind of a smaller, albeit still very successful version of somebody who has, you're a success story, right?
Well, in
make
some
a little
sense,
bit of money. You have an operation with a fan base and all this kind of stuff. I don't know if you get to a certain point, and who knows, you may get there at a certain point too, where you feel like, what else can I do to make a difference? How can I give back ish type of thing? And you have the means to do that. I don't know. I don't know what it is. And not everybody does that. There's plenty of famous people that aren't, particularly charitable or anything, but maybe it's a way, I don't know. There's something funny about it, right? Like when you cross over from human to demigod status, like a rock star or a famous actor or something, I don't know, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, these guys, maybe it's a way to make yourself feel human again, like kind of enact a little bit of humility or something. I don't know. I can't speak to it. You know what I mean? But I see that in people. They try to, or maybe it's just a thing of, thankfulness and saying like, okay, like in gratitude, what can I do now to make a difference? Or, you know what I mean? It's all about me and my millions and my huge bank account and my fleet of cars and all my vacation houses. I bought an island, whatever it is, right? Johnny Depp style. What can I do to do something of substance and make it a little less self-indulgent? How can I help the world? I'm in a position to do that, right? I don't know. It's always an interesting part for me to learn about these guys. It's the same thing with like a guy like Paul McCartney. Maybe it's a simple matter of the fact of like how much, like you have that Scrooge McDuck vault of money that you're diving into. It's like how much, this is more than my generations of my family could possibly enjoy for a lifetime. Maybe it's just a simple matter of like, how do I give, what do I do with all this, type of thing. Or maybe it's a confluence of all those things. I don't know. It's fascinating.
Generational wealth to me is is having tens of millions of dollars in assets. So
tens of millions.
That to me would be what I would consider generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a small fraction of a small fraction of a small fraction of what these guys control.
Sure.
And when you're talking about Bill Gates and those kinds of guys.
Oh, sure.
And so I think that, because for me, if I would have made billions of dollars, I think I would be pretty obsessed with trying to give a lot of it away. But the first things first, I would set all of the people I loved up. Like, and that would just be something I would do. There would be no question in my mind. That's like something you have to do. Go pay everyone's mortgages off or whatever. Just give everyone lump sums of money and make sure everyone's taken care of or whatever. And then you in addition to setting yourself up, but once all of that's done and you have that generational wealth, set aside $1 billion. I mean, that's that's basically, if you didn't do anything with that money, if you just let it sit there in a fucking CD making 1%, you would never run out of money.
No, never.
As long as you just weren't crazy, you would just be fine. And then you can go and take the hundreds of billions of dollars that you made and really make a difference. And I think I would totally be into that, like altruism kind of thing. I think that'd be really important. But I would definitely unapologetically make like the Moriarty name an aristocratic American name before I was done, as
That's
well.
awesome. That's awesome.
In my I guess aristocrat's not quite the right term. An oligarch. I guess would be the right term.
That makes sense.
Dig, anything else to say, or should we wrap this up?
No, I'll just say I never really thought about it before. Blood Sugar Sex Magik, as Colin said earlier, Magic with a K, kids. Great title for an album. I don't know if I ever really acknowledged that before. And then I got to thinking, is it 4 separate elements, blood, sugar, sex, magic, or is it blood sugar, like the level of sugar in one's blood, right?
Yeah.
Like diabetic style, sex, magic. I'm not sure. I think it's the form.
I think it's all 4 of them. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the features of the record.
And that
it's funny you say that because I never thought of that until recently about the blood sugar one. I'm like, blood sugar. I never said it like that in my mind until recently.
I mean, talk about a sensationalist way to sell an album. Advertising, baby, right? Blood, sugar, sex, magic. It's like everything we watch movies for, right?
And the album art is
romance.
Iconic. It's iconic.
So good.
Yeah,
it's so good, and it's so cool. Like it's so symmetrical. The way it's like 4 dudes, the rose bush tongues with the rose in the middle, the 4 different words, the 4 different words of the band name, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Mm-hmm. Like it's just cool shit. What did I see? I saw something about, I forget who was what film director was responsible for, not the album cover art. Maybe it was like the all the other graphic elements of the album cover and the sleeve and everything, the fold outs besides the cover, other than the cover, who was a separate artist. It was a film director. Was it the guy who directed Good Will Hunting? What is his name? I can't think of his name.
You see here, Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, look up the director for me.
Directed by Gus Van Sant.
Yes, he was credited with all the graphic design on this album, which is so strange. I didn't even know that guy was a graphic designer.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let's see here.
Little tidbits of trivia.
Indie and art house. Yeah. Oh, this is
maybe it's the photography. There's like some photo mosaics in there, some other stuff that's kind of cool graphically.
Interesting.
But you said it though, that the visual component of the Chili Peppers is an important part. I always respond to that. I think of that with all the greatest bands. We did the first 2 bands we talked about, the Beatles and Pink Floyd. You think about those visuals, Yellow Submarine, The Wall, like it's not, I just named 2 animated films for some reason, but Chili Peppers never had an animated film, but I could see them doing that. Yeah. You know what I mean? They would be the ones to have that, to bring that to the next level. We haven't had one. God, The Wall was 1980. Have we had a rock animated film since then?
I don't know. Well, you like the Gorillaz, right? That would be kind of like
Gorillaz they never did a feature, but yes, that's true. The animated component is a big. Yeah, they're touring right now. I really should have saw them in Philly.
Do they play on screens or whatever?
Yeah, but Damon Albarn's there, of course. Mm-hmm. And then the exciting part of that is, I forget the girl from Chibo Mato that's part of the band, but Del, the Funky Homo Sapien, could show up. De La could show up to do some tracks. Who else is involved with them musically? I forget, but it's maybe it's all of Blur since it's Damon Albarn. But yeah, I think that they would put on a really cool show. But again, the visual component of it is such a big part of the draw, which is always a kind of a cool thing. It's always an extra little bit of dimension, and not all bands have that, but to make that part of it, to make the visual, those guys are all artists. I feel like I know John Frusciante is a painter, but there's something like Pink Floyd, like those guys all came out of art school, architecture school. There's maybe having that visual side of the brain adds to the level of the music too. I don't know.
Could be.
Can't speak to that. We talked about that with Dredge, right? Your band Dredge.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely a visual component to that. Yep. Well, Dig. That's Blood Sugar Sex Magik, the seminal 1991 Red Hot Chili Pepper record. You can listen to it anywhere. I would also suggest go watch that music video for Give It Away. What an iconic video.
I have to go
video.
watch that.
Yeah.
I haven't. That would have been a good exercise to watch a few music videos. I didn't get to do that.
Yeah, I Give It Away I love music videos, and I'm a real big fan of seeing the bands play in music videos. I think that's an important part of it, and they do that in this. I love this video. So yeah, check that out. And it was fun to cover another great record, get into an American band this time for the first time in a while.
Yeah, good point.
And, so let's leave it there. Dave, let's end this episode of KnockBack as we always do with a dad joke. Hit me, Sergeant.
All right. That sounds good. All right, we're going to turn to our friend Brian Henninger again. Do we have him on the payroll yet?
I don't know.
Probably
let's
should.
try to get away with not putting him on the payroll for as long as we can.
Sorry, Brian, I tried. All right, Brian tells us, Kyle, I have a friend who writes songs about sewing machines. She's a singer-songwriter, or so it seems.
I thought you were going to say she's a singer-songwriter because like the singer machines.
That's what it is.
Right. Or so it seems is what you put.
So it seems.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Yeah. This is a good one. You know what's funny about this one? I didn't read it first. I saw that he sent one. I never even opened it. So it was new to me too.
Wow. That's a lot of
flop.
That's crazy trust, dude. That's crazy
trust. I took a flyer on this.
It's like you're getting notes from Rod Serling or something. You're like, fine, whatever. I'll take it. And you're just reading it.
I could see. And he came through. Kind of. Sort of.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
He threaded the needle. All right, let's get out of here. Dave,
all right, my friend.
Appreciate your time. And
super fun.
See you soon, actually. You'll be
Absolutely.
here for Thanksgiving, so we'll see you in the coming
days.
More
days.
Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things KnockBack and Last Stand Media. Support us on Patreon, merch, laststandmedia.store. See you live in Texas in February and more. So until next time, until more KnockBack, we'll see you next time. Until then. I thought I'd say it a few more times. Goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.